Once again, we'd like to welcome everyone to Randy and Candy Yao's Extreme Desire podcast, where we meet, talk, learn, and hear from some of the legends and people in the real world of hunting.
Once again this week, we're going to be visiting with some new folks, Dominic and Asha Aiello. They're both involved with the Oregon Outdoor Council, out there trying to help all the sportsmen and keep a name for us out there and a voice for us. So let's visit with Dominic and Asha and see what they have to say and get to know them a little better.
Okay, we are here with Dominic.
Yes.
And Asha, and I'm going to try Aiello, right?
Close.
Very close.
Yeah, so I always like to say it's like Jello, but Aiello.
Okay.
Hello.
And they're pretty dominant in the Northwest in the hunting industry and the outdoor industry. And so we're just going to share some stories and kind of what I'd like to hear. This is my favorite part because I'm a woman. Is how did you guys meet?
Start at the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Dominic's with the Oregon Outdoor Council.
Correct.
Asha, she managed the Tualatin Cabela's for a long time.
I was
right?
the marketing manager
Marketing
here, and
manager,
I'm
yeah.
also a member, the board member, secretary, treasurer of the Oregon Outdoor Council.
Awesome.
Perfect. Yeah. So that's kind of
They're very active, and
Yeah.
I mean,
and helping
they do a
keep
lot
things
in the
going.
Northwest.
Just try and do our part.
Yeah.
There you go.
You know, it's funny going on to the dating part, right? Everybody talks about online, like, dating apps now, like Tinder and all that. So we did meet online, surprisingly
wow,
enough,
yeah, we did.
but it was like, apps. You know, it was YahooPersonal.com.
YahooPersonal.
So, I mean,
That's
that's aging ourselves a little bit. I don't feel of myself as old yet, but, yeah, it was, cell phones were, I mean, there were smartphones on the horizon, but this was before that. That's how I met. Actually, what was our restaurant that we had our first date at?
TGI Fridays.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not there anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Over by Washington Square.
It was, and then you had one of the first, like, Windows phones, too, but that wasn't even until after we started dating.
Yeah, the T-Mobile Wing. That was
Yeah.
the first.
That
That was
was
the
a big
thought,
deal.
wow, that guy's cool. Look at his phone.
No, we both had flip phones when we met. Or no, I had a BlackBerry and he had a flip phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
But we started dating in 2006, 2007.
2007?
Yeah,
Let's
2007.
go with that.
And
Sounds right.
at one point, she tried to break up with me while we were dating.
Oh,
I did.
dear.
And
Yeah.
the reason behind that was not because I was being a bad boyfriend
No,
or whatever the
he's-
case may be,
It's good, man.
but I mean, I wasn't looking for a serious relationship at the time. It was just
Right.
having a good time as a young 20-year-old, and I was dating a couple other girls, and
Oh, wow.
At the same
He was
time.
honest. He
I
was
was
honest about
always
yeah,
open.
there was
There was
no
no hiding.
There was
you
no
know.
hiding anything.
And I mean, it was just
We were
being
both
friends
dating other
and
people,
going
sure.
out dinner, going to movies, things like that. And what was funny though is one of the girls that I went on a date with right about the same time as I was starting to date Asha, I was always very open about the fact that I'm a hunter. It was one because it's really who I am,
Right. No, I know all about that.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't really come from a hunting family, but at 14-year-old, at the age of 14, my brother-in-law was a big-time hunter, and he's like, hey, why don't we get you a bow or something like that? You can start shooting. And from there, I was on my own. I mean, he didn't really help me much, but he got me in going. So on this first date that I went on with this other girl, I tell her, on the first date, hey, I'm a hunter, and she's like, oh, well, if we keep dating, that's going to have to stop.
Oh.
Well, no.
that went over
no,
well.
guess what's going to stop?
Left alone.
Yeah. So needless to say, that didn't continue for very much longer.
No, probably not.
Oh my god! So the second date, or was it second or third date, and he looks at me and he's like, "I have something to tell you." And I'm looking at him thinking, like, "We have 6 months to live. Like, you're moving to Cambodia. I don't. What is going on right now?" And he's like super serious. He's like, "I'm a hunter," and I'm looking at him like, "Congratulations!" I literally looked at him and I said, "Congratulations." And he goes, "Well, what do you think about that?" And I'm like, deer, right? And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, nothing weird. And he's like, no. He's like, deer, mule deer, elk, whatever. And I'm like, oh, all right. He's like, well, why isn't that a big deal to you? And I was like, no, I grew up in Southern Oregon. People had gun racks in their trucks, and it was pretty standard to see guys during hunting season in camo, and that was just kind of what it was, And my grandfather hunted before I was adopted, but didn't when I was growing up, but we had deer everywhere, and everybody hunted and everybody fished, and we had a lot of fruit trees and a lot of fruit, so people would come and be like, oh, can we pick your corn, or can we whatever, and would barter. We had a handmade, my grandfather made, I think, a little smokehouse
Yeah.
when I was growing up. So I look at Dominic and I'm thinking, is this guy for real? Like,
Well,
what is
I
the
mean,
big deal? You know, for
'Cause
him,
I'm
it's a
just
big
coming from that
deal.
previous
Yeah.
experience
You know,
of being told, well, you're not going to hunt anymore
Well,
if they keep
that's
dating.
that's
you
how
know?
you were culling them out.
Yeah.
It's culling process.
Right.
You
Yeah.
cut. You made the cut.
Well, something like that. Because I thought he was going to tell me something really serious, and he's like, "Well, it's it's a big part of who I am," and I'm like, "Okay, that's cool." I just looked at him,
Like,
and
no
he,
big
like,
deal, hey?
yeah,
That's
literally, I was like, so. Like, I think we went on to another topic of conversation. It
Yeah, we
just
moved
was
on pretty quick. I think we went to sports after that 'cause there was a game on
probably
the TV.
there
or
was a
something.
game. You're still mad at me. How many years later?
She was cheering against the team. She was cheering against my Detroit
It was the
Pistons.
Spurs.
against
Oh my
Almost.
goodness.
That
You-
almost
you-
ruined it
right.
right there.
Almost got cut again.
right.
Yeah, we
I've
start
been
with
I've been a Red Wings fan since I was 16. So
Well, she got lucky there.
yeah,
been a what?
She got a pass.
oh, Detroit Red Wings fan.
Oh,
So
Hockey.
we started talking about hockey and stuff as well. So
I see.
I still never forgive her for cheering against my
still,
Pistons because they ended up
it's
losing
11
that
years
series.
later, and he's still mad about that.
Oh,
They
They
didn't
didn't
The
even win the
hard
championship
ones.
that year.
Well, because San Antonio beat them.
Yeah,
Of course,
the
Detroit
most
didn't win.
boring team ever.
Exactly.
So, Asha, you hadn't hunted. You'd been in a hunting family and grew up around hunting, but you had never really hunted a whole lot. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
I actually didn't even grow up in a hunting family. So I grew up in a family that had hunted, had no problem with it. Just by the time I came along, so my mom was a single mom; she adopted me, and then my grandfather just hadn't hunted in a very long time. My uncle was career Navy, and my other uncle I didn't know very well growing up, and they were a little bit of a weirdo. So we didn't see them that much, and they weren't really into hunting, and so. There were deer everywhere. There's a coastal elk herd down there in Gold Beach, like Crescent City area. Just super not, I was like, it literally took me until probably a couple years ago to figure out what the big deal was because, hunting elk is so different than seeing elk. And it took
Exactly.
me a long time to understand the difference, but I didn't understand it. I was like, what is the big deal? Black-tailed deer are everywhere. Roosevelt elk are everywhere. Like, what are you people? People slow down and take pictures, and we were like, oh, there's going to be another wreck. Like, it's so annoying because that was
Right.
literally the key. And then when I want to say I was probably 9 or 10, I don't know exactly the year, but it's this resurgence of cougars started coming, and it was, hide your kids, hide your wife, hide your animals. Like, in all seriousness, Dom's been down to my family property down there, and we're about a little half mile, 3/4 mile from the river.
Oh, yeah, you can walk right to the river from
You
your
walk
backyard.
to the Rogue River
Right.
from our backyard, and
Right.
so we would go on walks down there, and it was hide your animals because there were
Yeah,
cougars.
lion tracks
Not
everywhere.
many.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so documented. So I met Dom, and when we were having that conversation, he's like, well, do you think you ever want to try? And I was like, well, I fished when I was a little girl, and I didn't grow up on game meat, but it certainly wasn't anything that was unusual to me.
Right.
And I said, sure, yeah, I'll try it.
And then I figure out really what Gold Beach is because I was still fairly new to Oregon at the time. I moved here in 2005,
Where'd you move from?
Michigan.
Okay, wow.
So hunting here was quite different than what I
Oh
grew
yeah,
up
no,
doing.
it's whitetail and
Tree stands, on the
right.
edge of
You never really
cornfields or-
leave it, and that's where you sit. Yeah.
Exactly. So, there was a strong learning curve for me coming here. I was not successful for many years when I started, but so we start talking about how she's never hunted or anything like that, and I'm like, once I finally realized what Gold Beach really is like, I'm like, you grew up in probably the best place, maybe other than Redmond,
Yeah.
back in the 80s and 90s, and you never went hunting and you never caught a salmon on the Rogue River. I couldn't believe it. I was like,
No.
wow, how did anybody let you leave there and not have that happen?
Yeah.
The first
Right.
time I caught a salmon, we were out fishing with a good friend, and we were on the Columbia, and it was a lot of fun. And I haul in this, I think it was a native, but it was about 20 pounds. And
Wow.
he's like, "Oh, hey, it's a 20-pounder," and I was like, we throw it back, and I'm like, "So do they get any bigger?" And he's like, he's looking at me, and Dom's kind of looking at me, and I was like, not that it wasn't exciting, and they're just kind of looking at me, and the guy goes, "Wait a minute, where did you say you were from?" And I said, "Oh, I grew up on the Rogue," and he goes, "Oh." He goes, "No wonder." And so when I was young, and they still will from time to time pull out 45, 50 pounders.
Right. Yeah, they
You
get some big
know,
ones,
but
hogs in there.
when I was younger, it was 55, 60 or even more. I mean, just hogs. Like,
Right. Yeah, they get
just
big.
enormous.
They get big, yeah.
And it took some context for me to be like, yay, 20 pounds versus, 55 or 60.
Oh, that's
So-
cute.
Yeah.
But they're good eating.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
We're looking
Yeah.
for springers are just around the corner. We're looking
Yes.
forward to it. Coming from Michigan and not really understanding what the Rogue River really was like and Southern Oregon, things like that. But still coming to Oregon, I see, you've got Mount Hood an hour from Portland. You've got the coast. You've got the Cascade Range. You got, you have all of that within an hour drive of Portland, and then you also have Central Oregon. You have Eastern Oregon. You have the high desert.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm like, holy cow!
Yeah.
I was like, I come from Michigan where it's 3% public land. And
Right,
even
right.
when you get out in the country, it's still 20,
Small.
30, 40 acre farm.
Right, it's
farm
small
lots.
chunks, right, in
Right.
comparison to what we're used to.
Exactly. So I get out here and I'm like, okay, somebody obviously before me made sure that this beautiful area was protected for people like me and you and everybody else, right?
Exactly.
So I'm like, so what can I do to be that next person?
Mm-hmm.
That was, a couple of years after being here, I was like, okay, people did this before me. It's my turn to step up.
That's cool.
But the interesting part was I kind of went a weird direction at first. So I kind of levitated toward environmental groups because
Okay.
that seemed like logical. That seemed like what
Uh-huh.
was protecting everything, right?
Right. Well, that's what they try to tell you. Yeah.
Sure, exactly.
Yep.
And so I went and volunteered with all these different groups. I created a nonprofit that went out and cleaned up like the shooting pits on public land. Long story short, it's not around anymore, but we cleaned up 13,000 cubic feet of garbage off of public land,
Wow.
dump sites, things.
In a little less than 2 years.
And yeah, about 2 years.
Yeah.
But the more I volunteered with these groups, the more that I saw the political aspect to it and how a lot of times they may not necessarily be directly anti-hunting, but a lot of what they do negatively impacts us,
Yes.
and they don't
Right.
care.
No.
And so that was the start of my journey and what really ultimately led to the Oregon Outdoor Council.
It was fascinating to me because here I grew up in this, to be completely frank, and I've been pretty honest with anybody that asks, like, if you don't have a goal to get out of small Oregon towns, and you guys know, you don't get out.
Exactly.
And so I
Right.
didn't, as much as I love my home state, I wanted out of that little town. I wanted to go do things. I wanted an education, and I wanted to be able to travel a little bit, and I've gotten to do that. And so my nose was pretty much in a book for the first 18 years of my life. And so I missed out a lot in a lot of ways, I think. But at the same time, it got me to where I am. And so, here
Exactly.
comes this Michigan transplant over here, and he
Steals your heart.
takes me out, coyote hunting for the first time, and that was an experience.
You got to tell them about that.
So we have at the time we were dating. Gosh, it was maybe only 3 years.
It wasn't that far in the relationship.
It wasn't that far at all. I was terrified of meeting your sister. So his sister, who's an amazing woman, like she's kind of superwoman. She has managed to raise 6 kids and like
Homeschooled them all.
Yeah, homeschooled them all.
Wow.
She's a homeopathic technician. She's just super smart and like organized, and she's incredible. So she comes out, and the boys had hunted a little bit with their dad, and they were 8 and 10, I think, at the time, and so they go out with us, and so we're not married. So I have the younger one with me, and he's got the older one with him, and
Coyote hunting.
coyote hunting. And so we set up, and we have I like to tell the story because it was with an AR. So first time I had it was with an AR, it was 223.
And she hadn't been out hunting prior
Ever.
to this. This was her first time.
This was first.
Yes.
Okay.
Now I do want to say though I had shot, so I
Sure,
did
right.
Understand how
Yeah.
to hold a firearm and how to safely handle a firearm. But so he gets us set up, and we're on this perfect. It was spring too, which was kind of crazy, and it was early spring, and so we set up on this kind of like old skid roads, and so they're like deep in the forest, and they're kind of a V, and we're set up here, and the decoy's right here, and they're over here.
She's facing to the right on the right
Yeah,
skid.
and
I'm
he's facing to the left. So we're not. So if we do shoot, we're shooting in safe directions. Well, this coyote comes trotting up from down here, and he comes trotting up, and I'd never killed anything in my life, so I'm thinking, oh my goodness, can I do this? Well, Brilliance over here has my AR across my lap, and my nephew at the time was on my right, and so if I did bring it up, I was bringing it up in a safe direction, and so he's like, oh my goodness, and I'm straight freaking out just to this day. I can still remember how I felt, and I managed to get the rifle almost all the way up to my shoulder, and the coyote sees me, and he stops and he locks eyes with me. And clearly I didn't shoot him. And he gets to the decoy, and then he flips and runs back the other way. And my other nephew that was with you, I think he just jumps up and he's like, what were you doing?
We couldn't actually. Me and my nephew that was with me couldn't see the coyote.
Right.
Right.
I heard a squirrel. I was using a mouth call fawn in distress, and we had a fawn, just a rubber decoy out there. And I heard a squirrel, on the other side of the ravine that we were in, just going nuts. And I always love when I hear that in the squirrels, and I'm calling coyotes because I know there's
Yeah, they probably see
possibly.
it. Yeah.
Okay.
So I just keep wailing on this call. The squirrel stops. I don't hear anything. And every now and then I hit it a couple more times for about 10, 15 more minutes, and then I get ready to stand up, and you can hear, when the other person rustles getting ready to stand up, they jump up immediately.
No, it was Dakota. Remember, Dakota jumps up. He could see, like, you guys were sitting kind of like that, like you were facing the left skid, but he saw it, and
this
you
is
didn't.
exact. I remember this very clearly.
Hey,
Okay.
She was the first one to jump up, and
Oh, my
she
goodness.
looks at me and screams, "I'm so sorry."
Oh,
That was the very first, and I had no idea what happened, right?
Right.
So I look at her and I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And I think that's when
yeah.
the other nephew jumped up and said, "There was a
Dawson,
coyote
yeah, it
right
was
there."
Yeah.
So.
Sometimes that first one. Well, it's not even the first one. Sometimes it's 50 or more down the
Yeah.
road. You still have that lockup occasionally. Something's just not right. Something.
But this was
that's
a
good
matter of just
story.
not being ready.
Not ready, yeah.
But it's sitting there in the forest knowing that, okay, I had no problem doing that, like that. And then, again, here comes this Michigan transplant who has this crazy passion for the state that I'm like, yeah, it's Oregon. Cool. Really kind of got me thinking, like, what have I taken for granted? And what, clearly I was able to tromp around in this my whole life.
Right.
I should be paying that forward. Like, it's not that it's just going to be there if we don't do something about it.
Exactly.
And so, I might not have hunted my entire life or fished my entire life, but somebody else did, and that's, by paying those licenses and tag fees and buying their equipment, they've contributed. So what can I do to pay, really pay them back and then pay that forward?
Right.
And I think
That's pretty cool.
something you told me after that was when she locked eyes with that coyote, she realized at that point that she could kill an animal.
Oh, yeah.
She could.
Yeah.
That's what I was reading too
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
Okay, I
no
can do
problem.
this. It didn't happen.
Yeah, it didn't
But
happen.
I can do this. I was about to.
I think up to that
Yeah.
point was a question of whether you could. or not.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
His pelt looked like buttered toast. I remember that to this day. Seriously, I remember that to this day. It looked like buttered wheat toast. And I was like, I wanted that pelt. I wanted that experience. And I had no problem from there on out looking at it and going,
yeah.
yeah, I could do this.
And then she
Right.
killed her first one this last fall deer hunting.
Yeah.
And skinned it and everything.
Well, 3 years ago now. Because this last fall was your mule deer hunt.
I was talking coyote. It was that
Oh, yeah,
was
I
the
did.
first coyote you had
Yeah,
skinned and
I
everything.
did. I killed my first coyote, skinned it, whole 9 yards.
Yeah, but you killed your first deer. I think it was longer than 3 years ago now.
Probably 4 or 5, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah, it took me a couple of years to get the right attitude, though. Dom, even though he hadn't grown up hunting around 14 when he started bow hunting, like, even from a tree stand, had a different attitude on it. And for me, I was super whiny and just not in shape. And, like, I'm surprised this guy put up with me for as long as he did. And it took me a while to get the right mindset.
Yeah,
into hunting.
It takes time.
we would be hiking quite a bit. Even though I rifle hunt, I like to be moving.
Oh, yeah.
And
We're moving.
I don't know what it is. I mean, I love the high desert, Central Oregon, Eastern Oregon. I've been to all those places and hunted different things, but there's something about the dense western forest that really kind of gets me going. And I don't know whether it's because you end up so much closer to the deer a lot of times. When you're not just glassing a clear cut. You're
Uh-huh.
hiking through stuff. That really excites me. So a lot of times when our first few years when she was going with me,
So miserable.
I'd be going watching my footprints very closely, making sure I'm not stepping on sticks, and
Yeah.
it would seem like every fifth step, crack, and I'd be like, and so but
yeah.
she's there
Right.
now. She's just as good as anybody else to
Yeah.
walk through that stuff now.
Yeah.
We're not good at sitting either, so
No,
we're always
we're
covering
not.
ground, no matter where we're at. But
Yeah, it took me a few years. I finally joined CrossFit like 2 years ago, and so when we went out on this mule deer hunt this year, we're hiking up Rim Rock and we're doing 8, 9, 10 miles a day, and I was really afraid that I wasn't going to be able to handle it, and I handled it just fine. In fact, at one point I was crawling across the desert on my stomach, 200 yards to try and get to it ended up being a herd of does. But I'm literally like army crawling across.
That's
the
pretty cool, though.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah.
and it was one of those things where you realize really quickly like how far you've come, because it didn't. I didn't even think twice when he signaled to me to drop and crawl. Like I just, all right, here we go. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
crawl across the desert. So
the drop and crawl signal.
yeah, yeah. There's
What's
a lot
that?
of get out.
Oh, that's how it goes. Yep.
There's some hand signals.
Down, right now.
Drop like you've been shot.
I've seen a few of those signals.
Yeah.
It happens, But, yeah. So let's. What does Oregon Outdoor Council? What do they do anyway? So,
Yeah, it's a good question. So the way I like to describe it is, we have Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, we have Ducks Unlimited, we have a lot of great conservation groups that have really been the spearhead to on-the-ground conservation, and not only in the state but in the country. and they have done incredible things. Rocky Mountain Elk has reintroduced elk across the east and the south, and protected a lot of land through easements and trusts like that. But if you look at really where sportsmen and women have lost in the last 20 years, it's through public opinion, the public court, the public opinion
Court of public opinion.
Thank you. And through legislative issues.
Yes.
In Oregon specifically, we've lost hounds for cougar and bear.
Yes.
We can't use battery-powered decoys for big game animals or for waterfowl. There's a long list of things that we've lost in the last 20 years. And so really what the Oregon Outdoor Council did is recognize that there is a gap there. Environmental groups, anti-hunting groups, animal rights groups, they're using the court of public opinion and the legislative body to attack us. They can't attack us in conservation efforts because they know we're the number one funder of conservation in this country. Right. So what we did is we created this organization with the sole goal of promoting legislation that advances sportsmen's rights and wildlife issues, as well as educating the public and the media on the importance of our role in the environment.
Well, and I should add, too, at that point that, RMEF and DU and all of the rest of the people that do such great conservation work don't always have a method to unite. So sometimes it's difficult for, traditional archers of Oregon to unite with, say, CCA. Right. And so what we serve as, and if you're a manufacturer, where does that play into it? Like, you can't just send a lobbyist to the state and go, hey, here we go. Like, that's not smart business. It could alienate your customers. It's not a good job. But if there's an umbrella organization
that represents
all of them,
yes,
that's a different story. And this also gives, everybody from Loophole to Benchmade to CCA to
Trappers Organization,
the
Houndsman.
Yeah, the Houndsman. People that don't honestly normally agree on a lot of things. They agree that hunting's important, and they agree that, there's some basic tenets, but oftentimes they find themselves at odds for various reasons.
No,
right?
I know, and that's part of the reason we lost the hounds and stuff, because, it's just like fly fishermen against, guy that wants to use a worm. I mean,
sure.
You're fighting over stupid things when really we're all hunters.
We're all in the same game.
Fishermen. I don't care if you fish and don't hunt. You're still part of the same group here.
Right.
And everybody, you got to stand together. And that's with the cougar bear thing back in the day when we lost it. I never in a million years thought that would happen. I thought that's impossible, because that's what my dad was an outfitter my whole growing up life, and my grandpa and everybody, and I've seen, by the time I was 15 years old, I'd seen 300 bear in a tree. It's like, they can't do that.
Right.
I never even thought, wasn't even worried about it. But it happened.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, the very next day, my dad went and sold his dogs. He says, because I can't keep them or I'm going to get in trouble.
Right.
Sure.
Because now it's illegal. It's like, that's insane. It's just hard to believe that happens. Like,
and people say the same thing about just hunting in general.
Right.
Oh, it'll never go away.
Oh, anything can.
But it will if they take our rights away.
We learned, and that's the problem. We just took it for granted. We just assumed it'll never happen, but it did, and because they had everybody at odds against each other. That's really what it was. There's, lots of people that hunted voted against the dogs.
Sure.
But it was sad, and it was just a bad deal.
It's go ahead.
What I always like to tell people is, that may not be for you. That may, some people don't like to go and hunt in Africa, for example.
That's perfectly fine.
Then that's fine. But you have to understand that what they do is exactly what you do, just in a different scenario.
Exactly.
And it can be taken away. And say, for example, letting a hound chase a bobcat, a cougar, or a bear or something isn't something you want to go do. Look at it this way. The anti-hunters and the environmental groups always go after the smallest segment.
Yes.
Because they're the easiest to attack.
Right.
If you stand up for them, if nothing else, you are creating a barrier before they get to you.
Exactly. No, that's it.
It's really morbid, but there's that quote from the Holocaust, and Dom's heard me say this a million times, and it's Martin E. Muller. I believe he was a priest during the time of the Holocaust, and there's a quote from him that essentially says, first they came for. And he talks about first they came for the Jews, the Gypsies, the Romanis, the Catholics. And he said, and by the time they came, and he said he was silent the whole time. And he says, but by the time they came for me, there was no one to speak up for me.
Exactly.
And that was really, I studied history a lot in college, but that was something that's really powerful, because that's exactly it.
And that is
attack
what
the
is happening.
minority.
Yes.
You know, I'm a bow hunter. That doesn't apply to me. Well, give it 5
does,
years,
yes.
and it might. And it's, well, I'm
Right.
not going to speak up for that because I don't agree with it. Okay, well, maybe that's okay that you don't agree with it. You have the right. There's lots of people that talk about, well, I'm never going to go hunt in Africa. Cool, you don't have to. Nobody asked
Right.
you to go hunt in Africa.
Nobody's switching your arm.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
right.
No.
You know, but you need to understand that they could take what you love away just as easy as.
Oh yeah, it doesn't matter. It's just that's why everybody needs to stick together.
Yep. We're all in this
Win,
together.
lose, or
We're
draw.
one
Yeah.
big family.
It is what it is, right? And
And
you know,
that's the importance, I think, of OOC on a lot of fronts is, you know, we don't always have to agree, and we don't ever pretend with our partners that we're all going to agree on the same thing, but we will go to bat for things that are important
outdoors.
because
Right.
for the outdoors, not for just hunters or fishermen or houndsmen or trappers. We're going to bat for the outdoors and the people
Right.
that can serve it.
keep
know,
our way of
exactly.
life.
Sometimes bow hunters and rifle hunters can butt heads a little bit, right?
Sure.
You know, and I frequently see, at least on social media, this is better because, or this is better
Right.
because. And I always try and say, neither way is better.
No.
The goal is the same. The goal is to kill an animal.
Right.
Nobody
Harvest
is
an animal.
better.
That's your try.
Yep.
Because I'm certainly not a purist. I'm the total opposite. I just like to hunt.
Sure.
You know, I hunt with my bow and I love it. I hunt with my rifle and I love it. I'd hunt with a spear.
Right.
I mean, if they had a spear season, it's just that's what I'm doing out there because I want to harvest an animal, and I just want to be out there. I mean, and so I don't care. I'm never gonna become a purist at anything
Right.
because that makes me. I'm stuck in this mold. Then, you know, I only get to hunt 4 weeks a year instead of 3 months. You know,
Sure.
or I mean, or whatever the number is, or like say hunting predators or anything. You can keep it going year round if you want to.
Well, it's
you know
funny
what I
you
mean?
say that. I turned to Dom. There was somebody
So-
that was joking about the off season recently, and I looked at him and I was like, "We don't have an off season." And he starts laughing and he looks at me and he's like, "Well, yeah." He's like, "It's kind of a lifestyle for us." And without
is a
really
lifestyle.
thinking about it, it is. It's
No,
you
that's
know,
what-
growing up in where I did. You know, for as long as I didn't do it, it just was always a part of who I was. It just didn't something I embraced until I was fortunate enough to meet Dominic. But there is no off season because
No, that's what everybody says. You guys are always
yeah.
doing something like, well, we certainly aren't couch potatoes. I'll tell you that.
right.
It's our
Yeah.
lifestyle.
We are too busy. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's what we love to do. We're always out there somewhere.
Yeah.
You know.
You just roll from one season to the next.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
if there's nothing, you know, hunting wise, time to go fishing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's like
Exactly.
last weekend we're out there climbing all over looking for stupid sheds
Sheds.
Yep.
Yeah.
and friggin' things.
Yeah, we drive in to the property where the ladies' camp is,
Mm-hmm.
and as we're driving right up to Neil and Peggy now live there, up to their house, right out in the open, right where all the tents were.
Uh-huh.
Well, no, not the tents, but up anyway past
Yeah.
the barn.
Oh, okay.
We've probably got 4 to 5 inches of snow. Here's a great big old brown shed, just right there, right
Big
out
one.
their front window.
You were like success.
And they didn't see it.
So I run get
So I
it.
grabbed. Yeah.
The next day
They
we
walk
walk
right past it.
7 miles and don't see a single
Each
shed
one
no.
of us.
Right. Always.
Yeah. Like.
Always.
in the snow up
Yeah.
there.
We should
you
have just
know,
stayed at the
right?
bottom.
Yeah. Exactly.
But you know what I think
But
that
it's fun.
brings that, like, one of the things I say the most, and what you guys are talking about is so truly it. I've grown up in the outdoors my whole life. Hunted from a tiny baby, but mostly I was a cattle rancher. I was on a horse and I was out in the backcountry every day of my entire life. And then when I met Randy, obviously I switched and went into more of the hunting. We still ride, but every single time I'm out there, even if I'm trying to keep up with him and cussing him under my breath because I can't keep up and I'm tired and I'm hurting, you step up over the ridge and there's a beautiful sunrise or there's a sunset or you see a herd of antelope or deer or elk or screaming bulls blowing snot in your face and you're thinking, what did I do that God would give me that much? You know, it is so overwhelming. And when you talk about preserving it, I mean, all I can think about is I want our kids and our grandkids and our great-grandkids and on down the line to see that. And I'm scared that they're not going to. And that's not fair.
No.
It's exciting though. There's the largest growing demographic, as I'm sure you guys know, is in fly fishing as well. Interestingly enough,
Oh,
women are
really?
considered the #1 driver right now in
Wow.
fly fishing, which I thought was fascinating. But there, as of a few years ago, the study by the National Shooting Sports Federation or Foundation was women are #1 growing demographic in shooting and hunting, but also millennials. So
Yes.
it's not, as much as we love to say, like, let's do it for the kids.
And not to cut you off, but when we're talking millennials in this case,
Yeah.
we're not talking 16, 18-year-olds. We're talking
No.
adult millennials.
Yes.
Which is-
Yeah.
we're both
Yes.
millennials.
We're
and we're
considered
at the very, We're at the
millennials.
very
Yes. Like-
high end. But
Yeah,
Right.
we're like right on that line.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Which-
one too.
Yeah.
I've been around for millennials.
So no, he makes a good point. It's what's called Topher Sorelli has written a lot of books and written a book and then done a lot of research with the Wildlife Management Institute. And there was an article that came out recently on Wildlife Management on outdoor life from the Wildlife Management Institute, talking about, we're losing hunters. Well, we're not, but the largest is this group called adult onset hunting, and it's late 20s, early 30s, all the way into mid 40s that people are looking at it and saying, I'm not really sure what this whole hunting thing is about, but it looks fun and you get to be outdoors and you get meat.
Yep.
And the tradition actually is like third or fourth on that list of importance to them. If you ask them like why they're out doing it, they might have seen grandpa, dad, mom, whoever do it, but that's not as important as being outdoors.
Exactly.
And I thought that was a really interesting kind of viewpoint, having these folks that they just want to be outdoors.
Yep.
I think we probably all agree society is ever changing, right?
Yes.
And so your point about tradition being not as important anymore, I think we can see that just within a lot of different things.
Right.
And so what adult millennials are finding out is, all the talk about food and being organic and sustainable and the environment and things like that. People are like, okay, well, I love meat, right? And I want the animals that I eat to be well taken care of.
Yep.
But there's so much talk about how farmed animals are mistreated, whether that may be the case or not. And so they're taking that step to be, okay, I want to be part of that food chain again. And so we're really seeing society in some aspects come very back full circle to where we were a long time ago.
No, I mean, it's when I was growing up, that's what I laugh about organic. Everybody said,
right.
going organic. Like, you couldn't get more organic than I was. I mean, I don't remember, but a couple of times in my life, my mom going to a store. We had everything. We just raised it, or we hunted it, or whatever. And you talk about tradition hunting, and really it's just bred into us.
Sure.
Because not very long back, that's how you survived. Everybody,
Exactly.
the hunter was as top of the notch. I mean, they brought in the food for people to survive and sustain. It's like. So that's what's so weird to me. It's like you take dogs and you breed them to do certain things. That's why there's some people I think have a lot more of a drive to hunt. And if you start looking back, all of my family hunted. I'm just like a border collie. I'm fixed on one thing, and that's what I do.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
I do believe it's breeding too. It's just part of life.
Sure.
It's just natural.
It's your instinct to
and-
live and survive.
Yeah,
too.
and it's just part of nature. It's part of. You can't take that out of people. That's why I believe some people, they draw them back into it because it's intriguing to them, because it's deep inside them. It is part of them, and there's nothing you can do about that. It's just part of you.
And, you touch on a great point. We haven't gone to the store and bought red meat. It has to have been 3 to 5 years.
I think it's probably
Good.
5 years.
At
deal.
least.
Yeah.
We'll buy chicken every now and
Yeah,
then.
Oh, yeah,
sure.
love chicken.
Or
Chicken.
pork. You can't have red
Or
meat
if we don't get to
100%.
go
Mix it
fishing,
up a
we'll
little
buy
bit.
fish.
That's-
Those are our two things that we step out of the box for. That's
We
it.
really try not to buy fish. I'll be honest about that too. It just, after a while, you just go, man, I don't care what I do with this. It's not the same as catching it yourself.
Right.
Exactly.
And,
So,
and
yeah.
when you either share a meal with somebody that's never had, venison or elk or waterfowl with that first time, and you see their reaction, it's always like, man, so this is what it's all about.
Yeah.
And then when and then when you're able to do that, I unfortunately don't remember the very first time I had venison that I harvested myself. I can remember the first deer I harvested, but I don't remember my first meal from it. And I wish I could go back and relive that now. But when you're able to prepare a meal and feed other people,
It just brings a whole circle of life around.
No,
It's-
and that's
it's
where I
very
think the
gratifying.
ladies,
Yeah.
because I think they're getting so much more into it. My mom and sisters all hunted and stuff growing up, so I've never known any different. But seeing all the ladies get into it and stuff, because you have such a connection. You harvest a deer, and you have this gratification that now you get to provide.
important.
There's something about. I feel that way. I know, and I know the ladies probably feel it more than us guys even. More.
Sure.
It's just.
Last
Just a natural-
year, this super cool story. So, as you know, at the ladies' hunting camp, we always take an animal. For the first couple of years, it was a hog, and we skin it and quick quarter it. And then the first few years, we just kept it. So last year, one of the elk farms there out of Fort Rock gave us a cow elk to skin. Were you there for that? You
I
only got
wasn't,
to
no.
stay
I
one
was
day,
li-
right?
yeah, it was all
So
24
we
hours.
skin it, quick quarter it, and we actually ended cutting up some of that and giving it back to the ladies. And I watched for months the recipes. They were, I mean, when they won that as a door prize, I mean, they were almost in tears. And I think some of them had never felt that, even though they didn't harvest that animal. They were a part of it now.
Right.
And then
And
they
so-
took it home and they cooked it and they provided for their families, and they are just like gung ho now.
So that's going to
really
be part
cool.
of it now, and we're always going to cut
Yeah.
you know, break it down into larger chunks and let the ladies door prize it out, and that's cool. It's
Well, I
like-
think that that's something that makes Ladies Hunting Camp so different, though, is because that's one of the things that you're able to do. And that actually provides that, you know, you're not just, if that woman's never hunted, she's coming to Ladies Hunting Camp to hunt. Okay, she goes out the next year. She knows what it tastes like. She's already got recipes. Now she has a network in place because she's been sharing recipes, and they've been talking about food. And oh, by the way, I have a garden. And what did you guys use? Or what did you do? There's it's such a ripple effect. You might have given him a roast, but what you gave him was a network.
Yeah.
You gave him recipes. You gave him, because it's easy for us to talk about those things. And it's, man, I'll tell you, I don't know how many recipes we've shared with other people or meals with other people.
I ask for
my
recipes all the
goodness.
time. Somebody will
Yeah.
post
Oh, yeah.
a photo of something. I'll be like, oh, what was that recipe? We have to try that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
It's fun to do it different. You
Yeah.
get stuck in your own little rut of doing, you know,
I'm
deer
sorry,
steak
there's-
every night, but then you try something different. It's like, whoa.
There's only so many ways you can cook waterfowl too. So I'm always on the way, like, lookout. We're big waterfowl hunters, and so I'm always on the lookout of, like, it's a unique tasting flavor, and you just have to figure out what to do best with it. And Tiffany Haugen's recipes have been good, but man, there's some really creative, and I'm really, this is totally embarrassing, but Dominic and then our friend Joel are much better cooks than I am when it comes to wild game. So there's a lot of the recipes that I have that come from, you know, friends of ours that have been like, oh, I did
Right.
this. And I'm like, never would have thought of that before.
Yeah.
I just like to go to the spice cabinet and, you know, I know what the flavor of the meat is going to taste like and smell something, and I don't know what it
It's
is. I'm like, oh, I think
ridiculous.
this will go well with it. So, you know, put a little bit
One of the
that.
best
Yeah,
meals
it's
we've
experiment.
had in the last 2 years, we did venison backstrap, and he's like, oh, here, let me do this. And it was chanterelles we'd picked ourselves. And he put the venison and chanterelles in there, and we'd, like, I think we seared it on medium for just a few minutes, and he just goes over and, like, does stuff with it and comes back over, and I'm like, this is one of the best. Couldn't tell you to this day what he used. I know it was a little
good.
bit of cumin.
You probably can't either.
I don't
I'll tell you,
remember at this point.
the mushrooms and stuff. Yeah, that's so
wonderful.
good.
Yeah.
That's delicious.
You know, and kind of taking a step back here, but, you know, ladies hunting camp, that's something that's so important, because the biggest barrier for somebody in their adult years to go out and consistently be successful is an education on how to do it.
Yes.
You can take a rifle or a bow and go walk around the woods all you want, but if you have no real idea of what you're doing right
Yes.
and what you're doing wrong, you may get lucky once or twice, but you're never going to have that consistent success.
And it's not going to be gratifying.
And yeah, so much of it, yeah, it's just, but all we can do at the camps is whet their appetite, you know, because you can't.
Well, we give them a
so
lot
much,
of
but
safety.
you know, yeah, you do. You
basics.
try to
Yeah.
get them out there and get them started and get them going, and you know, and then just give them that network to where you can continue to learn and to ask questions, and
So
feel
that-
free to ask. You
Well,
know, I
and
mean,
hunt
it's-
with each other, too. I think
No,
that's
that's
the
just
biggest
it.
thing is you
That's what
create
we
a
just-
community.
That's what we were just talking about at Benchmade earlier today. Was with Matt was you know, the ladies can come to the site and hey, I'm looking for somebody to go turkey hunting with this spring, or you know, and you get enough women together, and you can create that to where even though you don't personally know them,
Right.
go put it with anybody for a week.
But you do.
know?
Well, but you do.
You might not do it again,
Yeah.
but
You do, though. Like, you get, whether you've gone to the camp or not, you get a chance to get to know them.
Right.
And even if you're like, yeah, I don't know if I'd want to spend 3 days in the wilderness with you, there's a different aspect to everything.
Oh, no,
You know,
and
like, Sheena and I may not go hunting together, but I actually made a point to stop by when I was in Salem to go see her
so
because
cool.
she was such a font of information, and
Yes.
she's got so much to offer. It's like, why wouldn't I form that connection? So
that's cool, right?
know,
You get
there's-
you get these opportunities. That's what's cool, and hopefully the ladies will use that.
They
and-
do.
We have been
They
so
really
blessed
do.
with the instructors and the sponsors. I
Oh,
mean,
they're
and
insane.
even Matt was saying that. He says there's something deep down in here with that ladies camp. It's different than anything else. And he says, I don't care what you do with it, just don't lose that. But we can't lose the people that help form it, such as
Yeah.
Sheena and Serena and
Yeah.
all the instructors. They're so amazing, and they're doing it
And
out of
Asha,
their
she's
heart.
been a great help.
Asha was
together.
wanted to get in the very first camp. I
I
didn't
did.
even know that.
Yes,
That was so
that's how we
funny.
got to know each other.
Yeah.
That's what, 5 years ago now? Yeah, that's. I think I friended you on Facebook, and you were
Yeah.
doing the first camp, and I just couldn't swing it that year. But
Right.
yeah, it only took me 4 years to get there for at least
I
one
know.
day. So maybe this year.
That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, and talking about ladies even more, it really is a hypocrisy in our society, at least a segment of our society, that they talk about tolerance. That's a big buzzword in society today, is tolerance, acceptance. And then we look at ladies on social media, and they go out and they kill a deer or they harvest a turkey.
Oh, yeah, they pick on them hard.
Bad.
They get hammered
Bad,
so
bad.
hard. I mean, and they get called a long list of
Oh,
names.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, Candy's been called all of them.
I've been threatened to
and
kill and all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
That would just never be acceptable in any other situation.
No.
And I don't understand why people think it's okay to attack somebody for this,
Yes.
but it's totally reasonable to say you should have tolerance for this.
Exactly.
Oh, I know.
I don't
But in
understand
this
it.
whole society right now, it's big time that way, as we all know. But
Almost 50% of our board, 50% of our board actually,
50%.
is women on OOC. And, not just women are like, yay, I'm excited about this, or, women who, like such as Serena and myself that really,
Very passionate.
get out and do it, because there isn't a way, I was asked, the Hunting Wives, Stacy and Rachel, I was made their honorary hunting wife for March.
Yay.
So they sent me this super long questionnaire, and it really was awesome because it made me think. And it was like, why do you do what you do? Why are you involved? And I was like, well, because somebody's got to tell the story. Somebody has to give us a voice, And there's plenty of women out there doing great things in terms of they're out there hunting and they're killing these amazing animals and they're telling these great stories. But, on the side of getting in front of the caucus in Oregon, the Oregon Sportsmen's Legislative Caucus, or, testifying in front of ODFW, like who, what are we doing to give them a voice? It's great to go out and show off what you're doing because that's important. We need to tell
It
those
is.
stories. But we also need somebody behind the scenes too, being like, hey, you're not doing a good job here, state agency or federal agency or whatever the case may be. But here's not only ways that I feel like we can be part of the solution, but additionally that, I'm here to also, I pay into your salaries. I pay into your agency. I feel like I have the right to have a stake in that. And so it's
Exactly.
important that we have those voices.
Very few people have the ability. Like, I love to speak, and I don't mind doing any of this, but if I'm put in that position, I don't think I could do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe if I was trained better.
intimidating.
It's very intimidating.
intimidating.
Because they're going to argue you, and that's when I would cower back. So to have someone like you that does that, both of you, but you as a woman, to me is like so important. And there's very few in our industry that do that. It's just easier to go harvest an animal and show it, and then say on Facebook, hey, I believe in my Second Amendment rights, or, keep public lands public. But to get out there and speak is very difficult. So,
that's scary.
I've done it probably, whether it be testifying in front of ODFW, speaking in front of a group at a seminar, or testifying in the legislature. I can't tell you how many times. But every time, still to this day, before I go up and do that, I have butterflies in my stomach.
Oh, sure.
no, of course you do.
Yeah.
And
That's natural.
you're looking at people of power, really,
Exactly.
and you're just an individual. You may
Yes.
have a large voice behind you that you're representing.
But they're not there right then.
Exactly. and you're being
We are
looked
in
at.
spirit, but
Yeah.
Right. And you're being like in the legislature, they're in a half circle, typically 5 to 8 legislators that were elected that hold a lot of power, looking at right at you and say, okay, well, what do you have to say to me right now?
yeah, and I'd go,
Yeah.
goonk.
Yeah.
But going back to social media, I'm glad that came up, because if you look at the hunting community, even I would say 6 to 8 years ago, right? The conservation groups, and I'm not putting anybody under the bus here, we were all guilty of this, were very absent from social media. The environmental side of things really capitalized on this a lot quicker than we did, and they used it against us in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm really glad to see that in the last 5 years, all of the conservation groups have a very strong presence
they
on
do.
social
Oh,
media.
I was absent from social media. I'm just starting to figure it out slowly.
But it has also, we've also not done a disservice to ourselves, but we have, there's things that we still need to learn. And one of the things that I talked about recently was that we all want to show our success, right? Look at this awesome elk I got. I put in so much time. Look at all the sweat
Work.
pouring
Yeah.
down,
Yeah.
and you want to show that. And I don't blame anybody for doing that at all. I do it.
Neither.
I do it as well. But when we only showcase the success,
Yes.
and we have those new people coming on board, are we
Yes.
setting realistic expectations
No, you're
for
not.
them?
Yeah.
No.
So what I've been trying to tell people is, tell the whole story. I went Idaho spring bear hunting last spring, and I hit a bear. I thought for sure this bear was done. Great shot. That I thought. Bear obviously showed impact, when I shot, and we tracked that bear and I didn't find it. I told
No,
the
it's gonna
story.
happen.
I
Oh, yeah.
told- I told the story.
Devastating. It's devastating.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it is very
happens.
devastating. But I think it's important that we share those whole stories because then it shows to the new
The
people
real.
coming on board. Hunting isn't just about going and killing something because you're going to go out more often than not and not kill
Exactly.
anything. Maybe not even see
Exactly.
anything with the state of our deer and elk at the moment.
Right.
But it's okay. There's
Yes.
always something that you will remember.
Oh no!
From
yeah,
that
you got to enjoy.
experience.
Yeah, you got to be out there to enjoy the adventure. You know, I just love. That's why I say I love an adventure.
I
So-
just actually submitted a story to the Oregon Hunters magazine, and it happens to me more often than not. And you've seen I've gotten some magnificent animals. Randy's gotten so many it's not even real, you know. But it doesn't mean we're always successful.
Right.
But this last bow hunting season, you know, I was so prepared and I was so confident and I was so this. And what's so funny is, you know, him and April got a nice Oregon elk, but I was on over 5 320 plus bulls and I couldn't make it happen. I just couldn't make it happen. But I spent one day for probably 3 or 4 hours running with the elk. I was one with the elk. It's something I'll never forget as long as I live, you know. And when I ended up, there was over 100 head elk and I'm just in there just one with them. And it was like, wow, that's more important to me than harvesting it. Yes, I want to feed my family, but I do frequently. But to become part of nature and to enjoy what God's given us is so much more important. And then we went to Wyoming and the same thing. He called in all these bulls for me and, you know, it was just one thing after another. It didn't happen. But that was one of the most successful archery seasons I've ever had.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, you don't have to bring home an animal to feel
Yes.
gratification in that time. Some of my most fondest memories from hunts aren't the trigger pull or walking up to the animal.
Yeah.
It's what led up to that, the
Oh, yeah.
experiences
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
you know, during
Exactly.
getting to that point.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. And some of the things you remember the most are the misses. You know, I mean,
That's how we learn.
It's like, yeah, it's like okay.
You know,
Uh-huh.
you can have all the instruction in the world.
You know how
until
much you
live
learned?
it.
Yeah, you learned so much from that
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
mistake. You
Yeah.
know.
And-
My poor
Yeah.
husband, my first tag, my first tag, like, I mean, he helped me work, like, got everything settled and, you know, like, helped me scout and, you know, we're on the White River early rifle tag, so I'm right up against the bow hunters as well. And it was, you know, it was warm. The early rifle tag for White River tends to be a little bit warmer than your average
Great camping
hunt.
weather, though.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's such a horrible percentage hunt that if you don't tag out, you automatically get a Western rifle tag.
Yeah.
Like that's how bad it is.
It's about a 17%.
Oh yeah, it's awful.
success
Like it's
rate.
awful. But I still was like that one because we'd gone hunting over there and I loved it. So we're you know, it's like was it morning 8 I think,
day
and
8.
we were 40, 50 miles into hiking and just tired, and so I was like, yeah, we're gonna do it. You know, I'm like, because part of it was like I had, you know, I'd been working on being positive, and I was like, we're gonna do this, and we're walking up this old skid road, you know, just hiking, and out walks this 4x3 blacktail. I'm shaking so bad I can't get the safety off the gun. He is literally having a heart attack behind me, just losing his
I'm
mind.
I'm
just
like right behind her next to her ear. I see this thing come out, and I'm like, "You shoot that buck." I whisper that. And I'm like, "Shoot that buck."
I'm trying. That was exactly what happened. And I finally get the safety off the gun. I went clean over his back. Like, didn't even nick him. Pretty sure he laughed at me. And of course, like, put the gun down, just dissolve into tears for like 10 minutes, and
yeah.
he's just kind of like, there. Like, I felt. I mean,
One
he
of
was
the best
great.
blacktail
Like,
bucks I've ever seen.
Oh my
and I
God,
just
and I
watched
just-
this whole thing just fall
and
apart.
he just let me clarify this too. It wasn't that he just walked out, like he just like hopped across the road. No, he stepped out, stopped, turned broadside, stared,
There you go.
Here I
Now,
am.
And then you.
and then he walked away.
and
And
then-
he didn't even walk quickly. He just kind of sauntered.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm standing there, like, I'm just in tears, right? Like, and we've never seen
And,
this.
and just to make it clear, this was not a drivable road.
No,
so this
Right,
was
no,
legal.
this was
Right.
yeah,
Legal to do it that
yeah.
way.
That's why I
Right,
said an
no.
old skid road,
Right.
like grown over and
No, yeah.
you know,
Right.
just a
They're
path at
everywhere.
this point.
Yeah.
And so, 45 minutes later,
Well, sorry to interrupt, but I mean, I was like, that morning was the first day we had any moisture on the ground. And
Yeah.
as anybody that
It
hunted
was dry.
blacktails know,
super dry,
that's when they move it. And so she just dissolves into these tears, and I'm like, hey,
like sobbing.
that's the first buck we've seen. There's water on the ground.
There's got to be more.
You got to
Go get another
pick
one.
yourself back
Yeah.
up. Let's
Yeah.
go. We're
You
gonna
just
So we
missed.
did it.
You just missed Boone and Crockett by an inch.
Yeah,
Literally.
right. Just finished. So I picked myself up. Took me about 10 minutes, and about 45 minutes later, we were on the way up another old, like just path basically, and we're rounding this corner, and sure enough, there's 2 deer at the top of the hill. And one of them moves, and sure enough, it's a buck. And I don't know where it came from. I ran 40 yards, like, straight uphill in complete silence. I will never be able to do this again in my life. And I got him.
Oh.
And I drug it out myself. Dom was like,
we took turns.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, it was heavy enough.
I helped.
But, no, I guess my point
Come
there
on,
is
drag,
that...
woman.
No, my point there was, like, he didn't do it for me. That's a point of pride for me. And so... he helped me get it. I wanted to do it myself, but I had nicked something, and so we wanted to make sure we got everything out before the...
It was a little messy.
Yeah, it was a little messy, and so we wanted to make sure that we got it out before any of the meat spoiled. But he helped me, but yeah, I did most of the dragging out.
That's cool.
Yeah, and so it was still to this day, like I've killed other deer, and chased other animals. It's still my most memorable. And
you don't ever forget them.
About 2 years ago, so we did Dom's mule deer hunt this year. In the Juniper unit, but last year we did a White River hunt and put a lot of time into scouting and
had an incredible, the biggest buck I've ever seen.
A shade bigger than the other one.
On any one of my trail cameras, much bigger, twice the size of the other one. On any one of my trail cameras, in person, even I've seen some big deer on
just a monster.
The winter ranges and stuff. This was an incredible buck, and so I spent the better part of that summer. I had multiple. I think I had 7 or 8 trail cameras in this big, about 1.5 mile bowl, and I was getting him on every single camera.
I would like to point out that this was my tag and this was my hunt, and I did go out with him as often as I can. However, at the time I was working for Cabela's and had to work most weekends, so I went out with him when I could. But unfortunately, he was able to go out more than I was, so he was kind enough to do some of the scouting and the trail camming for me.
Yeah. Needless to say, we didn't come home with that buck, unfortunately, but we did encounter him the very first night on our hike out in the dark. He happened to just be right there, and we crossed paths, and he
right where you don't want him to be.
Bolted and never saw him again.
Wait a minute, are you talking about when we were hiking out? I thought he winded us.
No, we scared him. We scared him. He was.
You think that was the same one?
Oh, I know for certain. I saw the antlers as he was running away.
Seriously?
I'm talking about the one on trail camera.
Oh, yeah. Well, and then 3 days later, so same hunt, 3 days later, literally, so we're still hunting in the same unit, and we had done enough scouting to where we knew I am not kidding you, it was probably, I went 100 yards from the other road, another skid road, and I'm not kidding you, the buck that I missed 5 years ago, I swear to God, he ran across the road
really?
And he booked it. This time he was not sauntering.
I doubt it was the same buck.
I gave you a shot.
No, we highly doubt.
Probably not the same one, but it looked a lot like
Same genetics.
Same genetics, like same kind of shape of the antlers, and I'm just losing my mind. And Dom's like, I don't think that was the same one, and I was like, that's it. I'm coming back here.
she's got a vendetta against
I got a score to settle.
Spot.
I got a score to
so
settle.
cute.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. But anyway, it's been
very
fun.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's been very
enjoyed it.
fun.
It's been really
And
fun.
you guys keep up the good work with
Thank
the
you.
Oregon Outdoor Council, and
It's
everybody out
appreciated
there,
more
let's
than you
stick
know.
together and
Definitely.
Absolutely.
We're all in the same fight.
be
We
as
are.
one.
Yes.
So thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Hope you enjoyed this week's podcast, and remember, it's not always perfect, but it is always real with Extreme Desire. Please always remember we cannot continue without social media these days. Once again, we ask that you like us, Randy and Candy Yao's Extreme Desire, on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And please check out our website, extremedesiretv.com. See you next week, same place, same time.